Yeah, maybe, I mean, you're more than welcome to use the whole screen if you don't mind. Or maybe, so essentially as an architect, we're always sort of trying to accommodate life. And of course, this happens very much, thank you, in the city. And the city is, of course, always changing. And one place where the change is always happening is in the port. Because of the global flow of goods, the ports is this kind of frontier where often industry moves away and you make space for new kinds of life. This is our headquarters in Copenhagen. We built essentially a park at the edge of a pier. It's somehow like this idea that where the city ends and nature takes over, so the ground is paved with sand. And even though it's a kind of raw industrial building, it's very friendly. You can sit on it. And also, since it's our workspace, I was afraid that being in a 7-story building would segregate us. So each floor is connected to the outside, to a terrace, and each terrace is connected to the terrace above and the terrace below. So the entire building is almost like a continuation from the ground all the way to the roof garden. Inside, of course, you have these kind of beautiful framed views of the water, of the skyline, of the life in the port. But also every space is open to the floor above and the floor below. So even though we are sitting on 7 different floors, it really feels like one team working out of one space. And finally, this kind of 3-dimensional journey culminates on the roof, where we have the roof garden. And from the roof garden, you can actually sort of walk all the way down the building or all the way into the park again. So in Hamburg, we've just been entrusted with designing the new opera of Hamburg, which in a very similar way is trying to imagine an island in the port of the Hafen city into a park. And this park is almost like concentric rings emanating like ripples in the water or sound waves from the opera hall inside. So it's almost as if the park itself tilts up and creates the opera. So where an opera can often be seen as a kind of elitist institution, in this case it is really sort of inviting and engaging. The balconies frame the proscenium that becomes like a window between fantasy and reality. And of course, at night, the park becomes this kind of like a sort of little beacon, sort of as an example of how new forms of life are entering into the industrial port. Another example, you know, if an opera can become a park in a port, a museum can also become a bridge in a sculpture park. This is Gelephu in Norway, where we designed the art museum like a bridge spanning from one side of the river to the other. So when you walk through the sculpture park, the museum visit becomes part of the journey from one side of the water to the other. It looks like a very sculptural form, but when you look closer, you can see that it's made out of a lot of sort of standard extruded aluminum profiles. On the inside, it's made out of standard timber 2x4s. So even though you see curves and sort of complex volumes, everything, all the museum technology, the exhibits, the ventilation, is made from these standard elements. You can in a way say it's creating something extraordinary out of something ordinary. A museum that is also a bridge, that is also a sculpture in a sculpture park. Another project that is suddenly incredibly urgent. This is a museum almost like an eye in the storm. It's the National Art Gallery of Greenland. And it's located in front of this social housing from the 60s. It's like an oasis of Greenlandicness in a city mostly built by the Danish government. So it lifts up almost like a piece of glacier on the sides of the shores. And once you get inside, you have a sculpture garden, and you have sort of a series of contemporary artworks, because right now Greenland only has ethnographic museum. They don't have contemporary culture celebrated by an actual contemporary art museum. And let's say like the political statement is that once you get into this oasis, all you see is Greenlandic nature, Greenlandic art, the icebergs, the mountains, the fjords, but all of the sort of contemporary civilization is somehow eliminated from vision, and it becomes like this kind of oasis of Greenlandicness in a city mostly built by the Danish government. I myself actually live in a abandoned car ferry from Norway. It's basically the infrastructure that used to ferry people from one side of the islands to the other. And I've just been reinterpreting all the spaces to create like a nice, let's say, infrastructure for the social life of my own family. So I see the sun setting over the King's Palace, and I see it rising over Copenhagen, a waste-to-energy power plant so clean that the steam coming out of the chimney is cleaner than the air of Copenhagen. So we've been able to turn the facade into the tallest man-made climbing wall in the world. It's a pretty daunting exercise. You can also take an elevator and enjoy all the technology that scrubs particles and filters CO2. And on the roof, it becomes a man-made alpine ski slope where the Copenhageners can hike and picnic and downhill ski. We never get any medals in the Winter Olympics. And I hope we can change this, because now the Copenhageners can actually practice at home. So this idea of how a piece of technology is so clean that it's actually sort of not only good for the environment, but also more enjoyable for the citizens of Copenhagen, we've called hedonistic sustainability. And that's an idea that we've been pursuing ever since our first project 25 years ago was the Copenhagen harbor bath that extended the life of the city into the water around it. We also designed the harbor bath in Aarhus. And it became so clear on the opening day that a clean port is not only nice for the fish, it's also incredible for the citizens that live there. They don't have to drive for hours to get to the beaches. They can jump in the port in the middle of the city. And we sort of came up with this idea of hedonistic sustainability that you can say is almost part of a bigger idea, which I think is somehow the core of what we try to do as architect. You could call it utopian pragmatism. And as Steffi mentioned, this idea of if Utopia is trying to achieve a world so perfect that it can't exist in reality, and pragmatism is dealing with the practical realities of everyday life. When you combine the two, it means that every time you have to make a project, you have a chance to make this little corner of the world more like your dream world. And I'll just show you a few examples. It's somehow been a pursuit of ours for the last 2.5 decades. Vestra is a factory, the cleanest, the most environmentally friendly factory in the world, we believe. It's a furniture factory in Norway. It's made from locally sourced timber, charred to protect it on the outside. We negotiated with the fire department. We only had to cut down 5 meters of forest. So the trees actually shade the workspace, so the workers really feel that they're working in the middle of the forest. It's made out of mass timber, which means that the raw building, the beams, the walls, the slabs are already beautiful. The roof is covered with locally sourced turf and photovoltaics. And the turf is locally sourced, so we actually maintain the same amount of habitat after the building was completed as there was before. You don't have to build a whole factory to make a statement. This is the smallest project we did. It's a 25 square meter hotel room in Lapland in the north of Sweden. It's a 1 room for humans and 300 rooms for birds and bats. So you wake up. You wake up in the morning to the tweeting of birds, and you shower together with a squirrel. You are surrounded by nature beneath you and above you. And just on the first month when we opened this project, it generated 1 billion impressions worldwide, simply because people really resonated with this idea of immersion into nature. In the other extreme, in Zurich, we're designing their new airport, which will be the largest timber building on Earth, entirely made out of locally sourced Swiss timber. So when you get off the plane, you can almost smell that you've arrived in the alpine forest. The only concrete is the tower and the foundations. The control tower pulls up the timber skylight, and the entire roof is covered in photovoltaics. And lastly, for the European Commission, we recently broke ground on the Joint Research Center where they do all of the economic prognosis of the EU. It's half a public square, half the Joint Research Center for the Commission. It's located in Sevilla, the hottest city in Europe. So inside you get this almost like a Moorish plaza with slender columns, naturally ventilated, using water to provide evaporative cooling. But it also means that we can open up the facade because all the sun has already been harvested. So you can actually see what the commissioners are doing. So some kind of radical transparency. But it also means that the building produces twice as much carbon as it emits. So now that it starts operating, every year it sends twice as much electricity back as it spends, which means that after 18 years, it will have paid back all the carbon invested into building it, and then it technically becomes net positive or carbon negative. I had the pleasure to go with Ursula von der Leyen to the Vatican in a conference, sharing some of these ideas with the Pope at the time. And Ursula gave the Pope a gift. So if you ever have to meet the Pope, he already has a framed photo of one of our buildings. So, like, I'm not a Catholic, but I have a feeling this could be my ticket. So the last project that I think somehow is the culmination of our pursuit of utopian pragmatism is 2.5 years ago, I met His Majesty King Jigme of Bhutan. And he invited me to Bhutan because Bhutan is an incredible country. It sequesters twice as much carbon as it emits, 82% forests. But they're also seeing that a lot of the younger generations are going to Australia or Canada in pursuit of economic opportunity. So he basically asked if we could imagine creating a special administrative region where he would create the right sort of ecosystem that would make it attractive for foreign investment to provide local opportunities to retain local talent. And we started sort of trying to understand, Bhutan is of course very different from Copenhagen, the flattest country in the world. The landmark of Bhutan is the tiger's nest, a temple nested on the side of a mountain. In Denmark, the only mountain is the one we did ourselves. The two countries are roughly the same size. The population is much smaller in Bhutan, actually. And they're both powered by renewable energy, wind and water. Denmark is often ranked as one of the happiest countries in the world. And in Bhutan, they measure their success as a nation on a gross national happiness index. So we took the 9 parameters of gross national happiness that are all based on Vajrayana Buddhist principles, and we translated them into the urban design principles of the city. So respecting the natural environment, foster spirituality, provide mixed income housing, strengthen communities. So imagine a city that is shaped by the flow of the 34 rivers that flow through. The power of its nature and its rivers into the nutrients for its agriculture and its power source that's designed for collaboration and togetherness, and that can attract international investment and retain local talent. So the temple dam at the top, then in the highlands you have lower density spaces for spirituality, education, tourism, agriculture, forestry. And then it becomes more like a classic city with all of the functions you need to support a contemporary metropolitan city. And finally, the dry port and the airport. Currently, only 5 pilots are trained to land in Paro. You have to sort of nosedive between the Himalayan mountains. Once we finish the Gelephu Mindfulness City Airport, you can actually reach Bhutan from 5 billion people. We made it modular, so you can build it with local materials, and it can expand without becoming a Frankenstein of terminals. The special administrative region is also 82% forest. So we bring the forest all the way down to the airport. So the first and last thing you see is this arrival plaza in the shade of the tropical trees. The forest continues inside the airport as this kind of rainforest courtyard. So as you go through passport control and security, you're actually in the forest. The architecture, of course, is a contemporary state-of-the-art airport, and it somehow tries to echo the kind of classic roofs of Bhutanese architecture. But one amazing thing is they still have 8 schools that educate woodcarvers and artists. So we're actually working with woodcarvers and also trying to translate some of their ornaments into something that can be machined, so that the entire airport, even though it is undeniably contemporary, it is also a celebration of the contemporary heritage of Bhutanese culture. So the airport is essentially step 1 and is currently under construction. The city is, of course, very much shaped by the flow of these large rivers. The rivers provide nutrients for the agriculture, but also provide passageway for the elephants to go from Bhutan into India. So we say, like, what if the rivers become like linear central parks? Then we have smaller creeks that are more seasonal that become community parks. Each neighborhood is almost like a terrace cascading down the tropical plains beneath the Himalayas. And the city becomes denser and denser as you reach the border to India. And then all of the sort of main artery roads connect east-west. And each time they cross a river, they become a cultural landmark. So the architecture is entirely built from locally sourced materials, river rocks, timber, bamboo, rammed earth. The ground is permeable, so the tropical rains can seep into the land. And we've been working with the local architects to create this kind of language of architecture that can be built with local skills and that somehow is capable of accommodating modern life, but also takes advantage of ancient tradition. The ground floor is always public, so you'll have education happening in the public space. Higher up, you have agriculture among where people live. You have various monasteries, spaces for spirituality. You have thermal springs and a hiking path that connects all of the major landmarks of Bhutan. And actually, the entire urban fabric is somehow designed by the flow of water. So the main rivers are dammed to protect the people from the elephants and vice versa. That creates an in-between zone that becomes habitat for various kinds of life and recreation. And then you have the community parks that are dry, but then in the wet season, they become creeks. So the seasonality becomes part of the experience of living there. Lastly, the different sort of public landmarks, because this city has no identity right now, but because the rivers is really what has shaped it. You have a Vajrayana Buddhist center where as you cross over the water, you can listen to the teachings of spiritual masters. You have a healthcare bridge that bridges between Western and Eastern medicine, a university bridge. A kid going to school might listen in and imagine what he or she wants to become when she grows up. You have an agriculture bridge, a market bridge, a manufacturing bridge. And lastly, two landmarks that are also currently under construction because we somehow have to create the kind of character, the soul of the city to begin with. One is this Vajrayana stupa, which is a place where people that are not practicing Buddhists can go and try to understand all of the ceremonies and the rituals of Vajrayana Buddhist worship. So somehow a contemporary interpretation that has all the elements, but in a more sort of museal setting than an actual temple where you might feel you are invading. And lastly, I mentioned the temple dam. The temple dam is the power source for the entire city. The city is entirely powered with renewable water power. It's a 150-meter tall slope that is made out of colorful modules, almost like a Bhutanese equivalent of an Indian step well. So anyone who stood on top of the Hoover Dam has fantasized about rappelling down, but of course it's illegal. But on the temple dam, you are actually invited to descend down, and you can take like 1,000 different ceremonial journeys to a sort of 21st equivalent of the tiger's nest, a temple nested on the side of the mountain. And in some way, I think the temple dam tries to capture all of the values underpinning the mindfulness city, is that it is turning a piece of engineering into art. It's turning the power of nature into actual power. And it's turning a piece of energy infrastructure into a piece of spiritual infrastructure. So you can almost say it's kind of a symbol of everything we're trying to do with the mindfulness city, but it also like maybe a great symbol of this kind of philosophy of utopian pragmatism.